Okay, well, thank you everybody. Thank you all for attending this meeting of Mumbles Community Council, the monthly meeting for the 9th of July 2024. Okay then, so if we go straight into the point at the beginning of the agenda, which is public participation. So members of the public may take the opportunity to ask questions or make representations and give the evidence on items on the agenda. Okay, so if we move on to point B, which is Phil and Caroline Slater, 5G and the proposed living laboratory test bed. Again, you'll find that you've got some documentation in your meeting pack in relation to this. So if I hand over to you, and as I said, I can give you about 5 to 7 minutes just to give your presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, firstly, for including 5G and proposed living lab test bed on this agenda. 5G, as you know, is an issue our residents group first brought to your attention some 5 years ago, and is an issue many residents are still very worried about. We trust you've taken the time to read the handout and are aware that the health and environmental impacts associated with wireless technology will be significantly increased under the proposed 5G living lab and test bed. You will have read that over 90% of peer-reviewed studies found evidence of harm. Rather than any shortcomings in the UPNET guidelines, the massive environmental footprint of 5G, the warnings given by thousands of scientists, medical doctors, the former Director General of the World Health Organization, the former board member of the UPNET, and the former President of Microsoft Canada, to name but a few. Is it any wonder that a number of 5G masts have already been burnt when government continues to ignore these warnings? The enclosed letters were sent to all 75 Swansea ward councillors, but most chose not to respond. It should not be left to people like us to question these impacts. So who is ultimately responsible? Many councils and LPAs believe that the UK HSA and Ofcom are ultimately responsible, but in April 2023, Ofcom stated that LPAs should be assessing UPNET certificates. At present, they are blindly accepting them. And the Welsh Government Planning Dictatorate also stated in December 2020 that the competent authority in this respect is the LPA. So councils and LPAs are ultimately responsible, and you as our councillors and as our community council have a role within the planning process too. As a competent authority under those parts of the European Electronic Communications Code EU directives that are embedded in UK domestic law, LPAs must legally reconcile environmental and public health effects, taking due account of the precautionary principle, and public health is stated as an imperative. However, it's not possible for LPAs to reconcile environmental and public health effects if planning policy states that they should solely rely on the IPNUC certificate, not only due to the fact that the IPNUC does not even consider environmental effects, but due to the many conflicts of interest that exist, the fact that the IPNUC does not assume any responsibility for the information it provides, does not consider long-term exposure, only considers thermal effects, and was ruled as unreliable in the Court of Appeal of Turin. And it's not possible for LPAs to undertake any sort of review without reviewing the exclusion zone diagram. You should be alarmed to see in the example provided that the public exclusion zone actually penetrates into the occupied building, and that's one of the sheets. And you should be even more alarmed that the IPNUC certificate was actually issued in this case, and the fact that the drawing, which was clearly not assessed, states that the information must not, and that's underlined and in red, be sent to the planning departments, a blatant disregard for public health. We know that the IPNUC guidelines fail to protect anyone with a metallic implant. We should be aware that in a recent court case in Cardiff, the judge determined that metallic implants must be considered in the risk reconciliation process. We also know that the IPNUC guidelines fail to protect anyone with electrosensitivity by simply ignoring the condition despite it being a recognised condition elsewhere. And despite several court rulings that are detailed in the letters within the handout, UK governments have failed to invest in any research. You should be aware there are several people who suffer from the condition with the Mumbles area alone. I was made aware of a further 2 last week, and many more will be equally affected, but as yet have not made the connection. And the numbers will keep on increasing due to the cumulative effects of exposure. Many people are currently living debilitating lives due to exposure to wireless radiation, and the introduction of 5G in the living lab will significantly increase their suffering. How would you feel, for example, if you could no longer visit friends or fat family, go to the pub, go out for a meal, even attend a hospital appointment? And some of these people will be forced to move as a direct effect of the 5G. This is not acceptable. The main driver given for 5G is financial, despite severe doubt being cast on the actual business case for it in a House of Commons research briefing dated only March this year. So ultimately, what? So residents expect you to support the protection of public health and the environment over profits, and demanding that planning policy fully complies with all legal requirements and considers all evidence and all sections of society in the risk reconciliation process. So thank you for your time and allowing me to read that out.
Thank you very much for that, Bill. I'll hand it over. Pam, do you want to say something?
This is quite timely, actually. I'm not sure if I heard right, but you said it is beholden on us to support this. I just happened to be around with a big gang of people last Thursday, Friday, and it came up as a conversation. Those who were in COVID were having to work from home are complaining that not that they can't run their businesses, but they can't keep a job because they don't have proper access to their computers because the connections aren't good enough. Pensioners are saying that these days you've got to have a mobile phone. But what they're saying is they can't afford to have a mobile phone and a landline, so they've got to go for the mobile phone instead. But they're having to pay for landline because they can't get the proper coverage on their mobile phone. So there's a lot to think about, and people's livelihoods and safety in their own home, and them feeling safe and connected to society and their families. I think that's an important thing that has to be considered as well. I'm just putting before you the opinions of other people in the community, and what they were saying is we need more 5G masks so that we can be better linked up and have a better way of living and working in West Cross.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Respond to that and then bring that in.
Firstly, Pam, on your first point made there that residents are saying, you do not need a wireless connection. A wired connection is a more stable connection. You get a better download speed. So you do not need wireless within the house. You can operate a mobile phone on an Ethernet connection too. Now, the point of going over to a digital phone, say that means that when the power goes down, you can't use your landline. It's just crazy, and it's just purely driven by profits, and they're sidelining all the safety and the
I'm sorry, these people won't be motivated by profits. These people will be motivated by what they have to contend with in their ordinary daily life, including some people in their 80s who are trying to cope with it. And I have to tell you, as everybody else on this council knows, once you start talking technically, it goes straight over my head. Because I'm hopeless at it. So I'm just telling you what other people have said, how the lack of connections are affecting their lives. But thank you very much for coming back.
And Phil, I just want to say I don't think this is a platform for the exchange of views, right? This is just for sharing information, sharing, and for us to decide where we take things from there. Okay, so I'll hand over to Helen now.
Yeah. So thank you, Phil, for coming. And just for everyone to know, so I have written to oppose the 5G masts in just to the conflict of interest. So I'm not an expert in any of this, not either, obviously, but when I read the UK government, I think the thing is that this is all being driven at an international level, a national level, a Welsh Government level, a Swansea Council level, and it seems unstoppable, doesn't it? Because it just all seems in this direction. But when I was reading the UK government guidance sheet on 5G, I took away from that this isn't primarily providing Wi-Fi, it's provided a different sort of infrastructure. And I just feel it's a massive slippery slope because it's not just the carbon emissions. You know, we all use IT, isn't it, as let's use IT, you know, it's going to save us carbon emissions. The carbon emissions associated with this structure are so massive, they're bigger than a country, I think they're bigger than the Netherlands now. You know, when you think of what the Netherlands have to do to report their carbon emissions, who's reporting on behalf of this growing industry. And I just feel as a mother, this is a huge slippery slope. I feel for young people, for old people, for lonely people, for people who want to get connected, I would not encourage them to get connected via the internet. I feel get out to meet people. And, you know, a lot of this is all about coming behind AI. That's the whole industry around AI. And, you know, when you think of the gaming, who's got young kids here? You're also too young, really, but kids,
Well, they are into it, yeah.
Yeah, it's the gaming industry around this and, you know, AI and all of this, it's just so growing and it's so concerning for young people. And I feel if people want to connect, they've got to put their phones down, get off the internet, and they've got to go out and talk to people. And it's easy for us to have an excuse, or we don't need to run these events because, you know, we've got... you know, people are connecting on the internet. I just feel it's a slippery slope and someone's got to stand up and say, hang on a minute, we're all just sleepwalking into it. And so I know we've had discussions in mails, you know, Amelia, myself, Phil and others about what can a community council really do. And you do feel it just going along with an international tidal wave of support for this. But I feel that, you know, you should put your hand up and say, we don't really know what we're doing. And it is worrying and there are drawbacks to it. This is not all a plus. Yeah. So that's why I feel concerned. And that's why I did, you know, in my little minor role, write to the council to say I wasn't supporting a master mail, which went ahead. It was all presumed development, so went ahead and it looks dreadful.
Yeah, and this is exactly the points that you're making. This is exactly why the community council can act as a platform for airing these concerns. Will?
Thanks, Chair. And sorry I couldn't be there tonight, but we have spoken on email before. So, I mean, obviously, as you said, county councillors and community councillors, it is very frustrating when we hear about these being implemented. Obviously, the health of constituents and ourselves as well should be the most important thing. We are always battered off with, you know, the fact that there was a infrastructure bill. I think the Parliament went through Parliament a few years ago, and that couldn't be argued against. And you know, every time I've brought something up, it's always battered away by the planners. So it's frustrating for myself and us. We've got a couple of these masts in our ward. My question though is with the emergence of Starlink and other sort of I don't know what you'd call it really, out of atmosphere Wi-Fi. What's the sort of first science behind that? Is it better or worse than the current masts?
Is there any knowledge on that, Phil?
Well, I don't have any expertise within this field, but having read a couple of papers on the Starlink, is the cumulative effects that the companies do not consider. And there's a little village or town, I think it's in Canada. They don't have mobile masts there, but they all have Starlink. So one house will have like the satellite beamed down to its house. Now that goes far beyond the actual house, and that will overlap the neighbouring house, and the neighbour has it, which overlaps his neighbour's house. So you may have 10, 20 of these directional beams which are overlapping your house. And that town has had significant problems with health, livestock dying, crops and things like that. So the science is still in a very early stage there. So I wouldn't say that that is any better than the road that we're heading down. Potentially worse.
I do have some knowledge about Starlink.
I'll go on, bring on then.
I do chair the funding committee for the National Radio Astronomy Facility, which I didn't expect to come up today. I can't comment for what 5G does health-wise, but I would say that the radio interference as well as the optical interference is comparable with 5G networks from the point of view of radio astronomy, more sensitive. So the two things, if there are health effects, potentially have the same impact, I believe.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, please, Chair. If I could just ask Helen, the current mast that you have in the mails, is that 4G?
Yeah, and there's an application, hasn't gone in yet, has it? Hasn't been constructed.
They haven't actually put the mast in yet, but the planning.
But you have got a mast in the mail.
No, none of the local residents were consulted on the 4G mast. It just appeared on site.
Yeah, well, this is, sorry to interrupt you, Phil. That's the point that Will Thomas was making, that there is no requirement to consult.
Yeah.
They can just do it.
Yeah.
And
as long as it's within a certain height, there is a restriction on it. As long as it doesn't exceed.
Similar scenario up at Pickett Mead. It just appeared. It was just there, and people were looking at, a reasonable outlook, and all of a sudden there was this column just appeared. It's not as if we have tried. We have raised and discussed these things previously.
But the fact that we've got them, sorry to cut across, we've got them there now, it's really hard to then, because we've got a 4G,
Yeah.
What's the difference with a 5G? So it all just feels...
There is a difference, quite obviously. There's no doubt about that.
Francesca, then, please.
Yeah, not to add to the debate of things, but firstly to thank Phil as well, because unless something like this is put under our nose, really, and I know I've met Phil a few months ago, it's been really interesting, and I know we're a different hat, we've been doing a bit of research behind the scenes, and it's quite interesting, and equally, resident safety should be paramount. But like you say, once it has been put in place, it's very hard. You are battered off with, it still conforms under a certain height and sort of the visual aspect. So it's very, very difficult. So, but I will say I've spoken to people in different wards throughout Swansea recently who have had the same sort of thing where it's appeared. They haven't had any notice. So I think people are now, their ears are pricking up. They are a lot more alert to this happening in their own area. So I think it's only people like Phil in all dotted across Swans that will make that difference.
Rob, what response have you had from the ward councillor, Chris? Because he's going to have more pull than we do, really, because we can give an opinion to City Council on planning things, but they don't have to listen to us. He, being a city councillor, is probably going to have more pull than us.
Yeah, well, Chris is 100% behind not having 5G within the ward, and he's very worried about the environmental effects of it. Let's say the statement that I made that we all have a role to play. We ward councillors, we will have notification from the telecoms firm looking for the mast out, so you can make representations then. And if a planning application goes in for a new mast, then you can obviously object to it within the Mumbles area here.
Richard?
Yes, thank you for this. It's quite interesting. Some years ago, I was at a social event, and we'd all had the same jobs, working on antennas. And 3/4 of us had very similar serious illnesses. Nothing's proven, but it's very suspicious. And there's more and more evidence coming out all the time, as you said, and others, but the negative health links to various antennas. And as I say, we are, without more research, we are sleepwalking into a problem, perhaps. Thank you.
Well, okay, well, thank you very much for your representation. I've got to think of a way forward here now. Exactly the point that you've made there. We have got a planning committee. Well, we're re-establishing a planning committee on the to the Community Council. The point that has been raised, and I think that's a very valid point as well, is that, and, you know, we've got to be pragmatic here, is that we're pushing against the tide, really, where with the Community Council, that will be going up against national policy, European policy.
Yes.
European policy, Welsh government policy, and all that. But at the same time, that doesn't negate, you know, making your voice heard. But at the same time, let's be realistic here. So my proposal is, going forward, we take on board what you're saying, we take on board the views, and a number of other councillors have raised the point as well. I think it's important for us as community councillors to try and garner views from our community around us as well. What is the general sort of consensus? And I would recommend you to do the same as well, to be honest. And then when proposals come in, we flag them up, we ask questions, we look for evidence, and we take it from there. But at the same time, we've got to be mindful, as like what Rob says, even if we say we don't want this mast, as a community council, they will just turn around and say, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have it.
Look, can I just so when you go out to the public and you garner what their thoughts are, most people have been subliminally sold this for 20, 30 years now. So, like Pam was saying, some of them, they want a better connection within the house.
Yeah.
They have to be made aware of the facts first, and then they can make an informed decision. If you just ask them, do you want a better coverage, then you're going to say
no.
Yes.
But okay then, but maybe we need to stimulate the debate there.
Is make them aware of the environmental safety issues.
And that there are concerns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just because we may not affect change doesn't mean that we shouldn't put our hands up to call for change.
No, I'm not. That's the point I really wanted to make, right? But all I'm saying, let's be mindful that we're a small community council in West Wales, and that we could be up against, you know, big multinationals and sort of stuff like that. But that does not negate the fact that, you know, that we have got a voice. So with that in mind, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for everything else. And if that, can we move on to the next point on the agenda?